It starts with the bed. The young wife takes at least half an hour in the bathroom every time. Then, when no one is around, she instinctively unbuttons her top. Next, she wildly takes selfies on her phone. Then suddenly, the janitor walks in. Startled, she fumbles and panics. She even claims butts got into her clothes. In truth, the young wife isn't promiscuous. At this moment, she repeatedly curses her husband in her mind. After all, her husband is a well-known internet chef. The restaurant is bustling with business. Even reporters come to interview him from time to time. Don't be fooled by her husband's gentlemanly appearance. Only the wife knows how restless he really is. Remember, the wife is a people's favorite teacher, but her students were caught red-handed by the principal. She is scolded there about how she manages her class. Then a boy pulls out a video they've only watched halfway, and there's a bottle she doesn't even understand, so she takes out the bottle and questions the boy. How could this thing be allowed in school? Although she doesn't even know its purpose, but considering the video, she is determined to confiscate it. A male teacher nearby can't stand by any longer. He explains that this item is an expensive import. Daniel was about to respond, but the boy interrupted. He pretended to be wrongdoing, saying he wouldn't dare again. Confiscating this thing is just my way of admitting it. But this only drives her husband crazier. The wife was about to have to work in the morning. She immediately recalled the embarrassing moment from yesterday. Just then, her husband came over to be affectionate again. This made him both anxious and guilty. She originally wanted to take advantage of the kids being in class. She secretly indulged in the text her husband sent. He urged her to take one of those pray photos. He quickly got into that state of mind. Then he invited her to a hotel near the school, even though she told her husband that she was still at work. But her husband insisted on persuading her. This is a good time that can't be missed. The wife had to ask her husband to hurry up and get out of the car. Little did she know, the school had already become chaotic. The class teacher should have been on site immediately. But at that moment, the class teacher was caught up in a strenuous activity. After everything that happened, her husband was still careful to remind her. Maintaining this position makes it easy to get pregnant. Soon, she received a call from the school, so she hurried out of the motel to quickly grab a taxi to the hospital. But coincidentally, a male teacher rushing to the hospital saw her. However, he didn't stop. Instead, he let out a sudden scoff. He didn't expect the seemingly honest female teacher sneaking out during the day to check into a hotel. Quickly, the female teacher arrived at the hospital. Upon learning the two students who thought were fine after checks, suddenly, the male teacher's gaze fixated on a specific spot. Perhaps the angle was wrong, so he shifted position. Watching the dismissive look on the male teacher's face, Jin-Won quickly adjusted her clothing. Her silence led the male teacher to think differently. Inside the car, the male teacher kept staring at his intense stare made her uneasy. The male teacher stopped pretending. He asked if rushing out of the motel felt disappointing. Jin-Won hesitated to explain. Going to the motel wasn't what you think. The male teacher outwardly said he believed her, so I will truthfully report it to the principal. Jin-Won was left distressed and uncertain. The car had to stop. The male teacher suggested, why don't you just show me? I'll act like nothing happened. Furious, Jin-Won called him a beast. But this beast saw all women as morally culpable. Angrily, Jin-Won got out of the car. Yet he knew she would turn back. Indeed, the next moment, she did turn around. In a daze, she even tore her clothes. Little did you know that at this moment, he was playing with every time the young wife returns home. She first checks if her husband is waiting in bed. Upon realizing her husband wasn't back yet, she knew she was on the verge of losing her mind due to him. The whole time she was still working, she got a text from her husband inviting her to a motel. She was reluctant 100 times, but she couldn't resist his constant coaxing. After years of marriage without her husband specifically picked a romantic day, he hoped for a spark. But when she came out of the motel, she unexpectedly ran into a male colleague. He thought of her in less than respectable way. On the way back, he took her along. Her colleague showed his true colors to remind her that it's not right to stay at motels for work, and he was sweating profusely. The more she explained, the more her colleague smirked. After parking, he suggested wanting to see more. She glared at him, thinking he was crazy. He nonchalantly reminded her, how will I explain this to the boss? She tied her clothes and just wanted to get out of that cursed car. Her colleague just wanted to tease her, but he didn't expect her to actually turn around. And she ripped her shirt open. Seeing the colorful interior shocked him, and he was visibly stunned. He couldn't believe her mind was so simple. It wouldn't actually spill anything. But looking at her terrified expression, he teased her again. I'm not that untrustworthy. Jenna whispered for him to be quiet. The more she thought about it, the more distressed she became. Why is she so unlucky? She comforted herself, knowing she's still a good cry, and this will be behind her. But she was underestimating the situation. The next day, her male colleague persistently hunted for her. So here are 2 positive tickets. Hope your relationship keeps blossoming. Jenna said thank you and walked away without thinking much. Little did she know as she left, the colleague was staring at her swaying head. His face showed he had ill intentions. Meanwhile, her husband showed no signs of restraint. In broad daylight, he was scheming against her. The wife finally couldn't take it anymore. What's the difference between this feeling and being a robot? Perhaps he felt his own rudeness. He comforted her, suggesting a checkup. The wife knew she'd have to endure medication soon. Her husband confidently assured her that whatever the result, I will be here for you. The wife felt relieved that her husband didn't despise her for not having children. Soon, the doctor received the test result. The doctor asked the first question, are you familiar with the situation? The wife glanced at her husband. But this result left her husband in disbelief. After stepping out, her husband seemed significantly shaken. He just left his wife without a word. The wife knew her husband needed some space, so by evening, her husband still hadn't returned. So she went to her husband's restaurant. What she didn't expect was the scene in front of her. She intended to call her husband, but to her surprise, he just glanced and hung up. He immediately ended the call. This made the wife furious instantly. Clearly, he's the one who can't perform yet. This lurked outside. Just then, a male colleague joked about how he facilitated their couple's concert. This reminder of loneliness sparked a bold idea in Jamie. Looking at her still perfect reflection, she unexpectedly found herself at the Amino's door. Perhaps it was a telepathic connection. He quickly ran downstairs. He saw loneliness etched on the woman's face. The next scene left them both in the middle of the night. The wife was restless, unable to sleep. It wasn't that her husband was too aggressive. It was just that he wasn't performing adequately. If he hadn't caught her up there in hand, she wouldn't have gone for the checkup with him, only to find out her husband has hysterectomy. This meant she could never have children. Don't be fooled by how calmly her husband acts as if nothing's wrong. In reality, she discovered that her husband, though she didn't know when her husband developed this habit, it left her feeling anxious inside. Her already useless husband was being promiscuous unbeknownst to her. He just wanted to prove himself outside, simply whether he was worth something. What's worse, he not but also texted her, making excuses about work you lay, huh? Well, she decided to find someone else to work with when her male colleague noticed the woman arriving. He hurried down the stairs. The two shared a tacit understanding, but at this moment, the woman seemed to regain some clarity, just as she was about to turn back. She was swiftly put into the car by her male colleague. Just imagine the vibrating sensor lights nearby. When she returned home, the wife felt a bit guilty. Hearing her husband's footsteps returning, feeling guilty, she quickly tried to please him. But her husband's face clearly appeared to be upset. Yet, she had no idea if it was because he couldn't get it elsewhere, or if he was mad at himself for feeling useless. Or perhaps he discovered her impulsive behavior was when her husband reached out to embrace her. After waking, she began to feel conflicted. Her relationship with her husband was still good. What did she do about her impulsive actions with her male colleague? So the next day, she planned to call her. Yesterday's incident was my fault. The male colleague took it seriously. It was a mistake from my perspective. I was being sincere. After hanging up, the woman realized, yep, the principal assigned her a task. She heard she had to go to the internet cafe to catch the boys in her class. She felt it was her duty. But the principal insisted the teacher point company. After all, could a woman handle those little troublemakers? In fact, the woman just wanted to avoid teacher point. Now things were getting interesting. See, teacher point is indifferent to me. Jin Yuan cautiously asked him, if it's inconvenient for you, I can go alone. He replied, it's convenient for me. Jin Yuan couldn't say a word in response. Unbeknownst to her, this time teacher Kwon made a new discovery. Then they were at the internet cafe. To their surprise, they actually caught one. After she scolded the student, he hurried back to class for self-study. Unexpectedly, this guy tried to negotiate. He was willing to go to other internet cafes to bring his buddies to class. Jin Yuan thought she could profit from the situation, but her expression remained highly cautious, fearing they might get into unnecessary complications. Even while eating rice ball, she had to stay alert, but suddenly she found the rice ball too spicy. She thought about drinking some water to ease it. Unexpectedly, the man not only noticed her struggle, but also readily offered to trade his untouched rice ball with her. He isn't even put off by the one that she had spit on. Maybe she let her guard down. And soon they went from drinking mineral water to soda. At this point, Joy Han seemed a bit tipsy. Then she asked teacher Kyun a very embarrassing question. You're healthy in that regard, right? Teacher Kyun was momentarily taken aback. Unexpectedly, Joy Han blurted out everything about her husband, but she didn't realize that her words would make her regret it immensely. Suddenly, the woman noticed that there seemed to always be a pair of sinister eyes watching her from the shadow. The anonymous envelope on the table made her feel incredibly uneasy. Sure enough, inside the envelope was a S, so she tried to plug it into her computer. But after just one glance, she quickly shut. It seems that what if it really does come true, though she lay in bed with her husband that night. She was already a bundle of nerves, worried that her husband might discover her secret. When her husband suddenly expressed his love, she could only pretend to comply. Soon after a bout of passion, taking advantage of the fact that her husband had fallen asleep, exhausted, she quietly got up and rushed to the study to examine the video. What could have captured that scene? Every action in the car had been recorded so clearly. Suddenly, she found the answer in the rearview mirror. The next day, she was restless, wondering what the other party's intentions were. Suddenly, a male colleague accidentally bumped into her. Although she doesn't know who they are yet, she's certain this person belongs to the office, yet she never suspected teacher Kwon, who was in the car with her. Then she went to the parking lot, checking each car in the mirrors. Soon, she zeroed in on and saw that self belonged to the school nurse, so she pretended to see the nurse for a checkup. But in fact, she wanted to see if it was her. However, the nurse did not seem suspicious, but she still wanted to ask the nurse if she drove to work every day. When she received an affirmative answer, she reluctantly continued to inquire if she had a habit of parking. The nurse naturally replied that she didn't. Feared her suspicion might asking too much. She stopped questioning further. But who else besides this nurse hasn't saw? So she's quiet in the parking lot again, and discovered the principal also drove and saw. Fortunately, they worked in the same office. So when the principal was out, she secretly went to find her schedule notebook. Unbeknownst to her, this sneaky move alerted the snake. That night, as noted in the schedule, the principal left early, which meant it wasn't the principal. Suddenly, teacher Kwon called out to the principal, gave her the opportunity to slip away. In fact, teacher Kwon was specifically helping her, just as she was imagining. Mr. Kwon asked her why she was looking at the principal. She already regretted her impulsive action with him last time, so she chose to ignore him. But Mr. Kwon reminded her, if I hadn't helped you just now, you would have been caught up. Think you'll always be so lucky. This guy just doesn't want Changnam to keep investigating. Just as Sunyeol was leaving, the female doctor from health department called back. She needed to wait for the blood report tomorrow. If your stomach still hurts, you can take a painkiller. So she casually mentioned, remember, Nicole was borrowed by Mr. Min last month. Then she specifically invited Mr. Nan to a corner, so she took out an ashtray. She asked him what he wanted to send on this list. Mr. Nan looked confused, not understanding, seeing he was still playing dumb. No longer pretended to ask. He took the doctor's dash and did use. Speaking of the dashcom, Mr. Nan recalled that I borrowed the dog and Mr. Kwon asked me for the dashcom, saying he wanted to confirm something. He gave it back to me in half an hour. Now she finally understood. It turns out all of this was caused by that scoundrel. Frustratingly, at this moment, she discovered she was pregnant. As it turns out, her husband has sperm deficiency, making the chance of pregnancy almost zero. So, isn't this child the result of the best? She couldn't swallow her anger. She wanted to confront that jerk about why he sent her that astray. Suddenly, a female doctor appeared. And that teacher hadn't gone far yet. The doctor informed her that she was pregnant. The word pregnant directly reads, although she insisted it wasn't a pregnancy, but this only convinced the teacher that the child must be. As soon as the doctor left, the teacher couldn't wait, pulled her into an empty classroom. Whenever she was alone, she always exuded womanly fragrance. This had instantly attracted male cult. They even eagerly offered to help her with books. They reminded her not to overwork herself. The more she heard, the angrier she thought. But this guy was completely oblivious. He kept insisting she should drink more milk. She couldn't take it anymore. She bluntly caught him shameless, knowing she had gone too far this time. She declared she would never tease him again. After all, the child you're carrying is mine. Mentioning the child made her want to ignore him even more. If she had seen her husband messing around outside, he wouldn't have been up at midnight complaining that the Miss World was far more complicated than she imagined. Realizing she might be wrong, she intended to turn back, but it was already too late. How could the gods have such an easy opportunity? So he pulled her into the car. But unexpectedly, she received an asp drive. Inside was the video of their encounter that night. After some investigation, she found she intended to let it go, thinking they owed each other nothing. Unfortunately, the word pregnant was taken in fully by the guy. As soon as the female doctor left, the guy pulled her into an empty classroom. He wanted to confirm if it was their child. Instantly, she denied it. But the guy was informed, isn't your husband inferred? If the child isn't mine, could it be someone else? Hearing this, she slapped him hard. She angrily caught him worse than beat. She kept saying that man was a misunderstanding, and he deliberately sent the Dashkin's husband. What did you mean by that? The guy admitted he was wrong, but you were the one who pushed me first. They had originally agreed that he would cook for her. He would prepare a nice meal. But surprise, he was stood up. Meanwhile, she was enjoying a fancy dinner with her husband. How could the guy who was dead swallow his frustration? So he sent her the video from that day, just to remind her that they had something going on. But even if he apologizes now, Jinyan is furious at her. But men naturally have thick skins, as long as he's alone with her. He will shower her with attention. Fearing his actions will be exposed, she wants nothing to do with this guy. But this guy keeps asking her, does your husband know? Jinyan warns him to shut up. As this leaks, I'll make you pay. The guy's will talks her into feeling secure. I won't let anyone interfere in our relationship. But when she got home, she was drenched in sweat. The TV with the surveillance footage. She urgently wanted to turn it off, only to realize she needed the remote. But the word had to die unless she could find it. So she had to quickly unplug it. She gasped with relief that her husband was at home. Only then did she realize this looked just like the asp drive she received. Stepping outside, she cussed out the caller. What do you want from me? What are you trying to achieve by playing this video on my TV? The teacher was completely taken aback by her word. Jinyan realized she was dealing with a lunatic. Little did she know, her husband was scarier than a madman. That night, her husband suddenly found something in it, and this object turned her husband into a completely dark character. The wife suddenly feels a haunting vibe in the house. But just as she was lost in thought, her husband slipped a necklace around her neck from behind. She felt more guilty than ever. It had been years since her husband had been so tender, so she calmly asked her husband. Surprisingly, her husband pulled something. He stuffed it into her hand. He thanked her as he did. His thank you was for her getting pregnant. But she was scared because of this baby. She wasn't even sure if it was her husband's. She panicked, thinking if her husband found out about her affair with Mr. Kwon, would he divorce her? Actually, her husband had recently received a asp with her scandalous video. He even looped it on the TV at home. But the wife thought it was just Mr. Kwon's prank, so she threw the asp in front of her husband. If he liked it, he could take it home and enjoy it. Just don't be so cruel. In reality, the asp was anonymously sent to her husband by her, but he wasn't able to go to her house to do that. But just when she got home, that haunting Mr. Kwon caught her. Feeling guilty, she immediately hid in her study. Then she angrily scolded him to leave her alone, but Mr. Kwon insisted on explaining. I did send the asp to your husband in a heated moment. I never plugged the video into your... But bluntly, your husband actually knew all along. Didn't your husband ever ask you anything? Suddenly, Positive opened the door. She was so startled that her hair stood on end. She saw her husband gently called her to dinner. She gritted her teeth and forced a smile. She couldn't imagine how her husband could remain so calm. Little did she know how capable her husband truly was. The next day, knowing the baby and his wife was probably not his, he still joyfully went shopping for baby supplies. Her husband's demeanor was completely unbothered, as if he knew nothing. So she was sure that Ms. Kwon had deceived her. Her husband had no idea about their affair. So she specially sought out Ms. Kwon. She adamantly declared that my husband knew nothing about. No man knows if his wife is carrying another man's child and still appears so happy. Since Jinyan said that, he could only conclude that I was just kidding with you. I didn't send your husband the asp stick. I also manipulated the TV playback. Actually, he just wanted to end the couple's activities in the car. Were clearly seen by the husband hiding in the dark. Two of them remained unaware. Next, the husband's inner strength would completely. The wise person knows not to make themselves lose control. He would slowly torment them. At night, the wife couldn't sleep for a long time, because her husband had never come home this late. He simply said he worked late. As the night went on, she felt something herself. So she sneaked into her husband's car. Then, she took out the dashcam. Next, she discovered her husband was with Miss Kwon. Without word, she slapped him across the face. Then his feet didn't stop at all. After years of marriage, it was the first time she saw him so